About 20 years ago, I went on a Rotary professional exchange to Norway. It's an amazing program that invites non-Rotarians to go as a team to a foreign country to learn from Rotarians and other folks who work in the same fields. I was lucky to be chosen, and I went with a group of folks from this part of our state. For 5 weeks, we spoke at Rotary meetings throughout Norway, and we visited with folks one-on-one who worked in our fields. It was wonderful. We even had an audience with the king. I made new friends, and it was also exhausting to be on 24/7. Twice during our 5-week stay there, those kind and gentle Norwegians put our team up in a cabin far off in the mountains for a chance to unwind. As a whole, I found that Norwegians are not religious, but they're certainly spiritual folks. I discovered that most of them found their connection to the sacred in those mountains and fjords. They rarely found it inside musty old buildings. The cabins we stayed in were not connected to any electrical grid. There was only generators to be of service for a few hours a day. Our summer evenings were well lit by the glow of fires and candles and the occasional lantern. On our first night there, our team gathered on the outside deck of the A-frame cabin. There was not another cabin or building in sight. Electric light was nowhere to be seen. The shadows of the mountains surrounded us, and we could feel their dark embrace. Looking up into the night sky, we saw a deepness and intensity of stars in that magnificent night sky that none of us had ever seen before. Most of us came from areas where city light blinded us from seeing anything more than the sky's brightest show-offs like the Big Dipper, Orion, Mars, and of course the moon. But here, the Milky Way laid like a heavy blanket on top of us, dense with stars that revealed the intense multi-layered dimension that I never knew floated above me. We grew quiet as we stared up in speechless wonder. Suddenly, a shooting star raced across the sky and then quickly petered out. In a few minutes, another, and then another. I had never even seen a shooting star before, and that evening we saw at least 20. Our voices hushed, and then suddenly we would shout out, "There's another one!" Intoxicated by awe, we saw satellites moving methodically across the sky. Embracing this intensity, this mystery, we breathed in and out, feeling alive, overwhelmed, and reverent all at the same time. We were in awe. So what exactly is awe? We've all experienced it at some times in our lives. Scientists say that awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends our understanding of the world. In early human history, awe was often experienced during sacred rituals, in intense weather, or earthly related traumas. Folks imagining that earthquakes, tornadoes, or storms were some connection or messages from the gods. Today, we understand the science behind such events, but still, we can be moved by their intensity when feelings of fear and amazement blend uniquely together. I personally love a good thunderstorm. Nothing's more mesmerizing to me than sitting outside, but under cover during a raging storm. The intense roaring thunder and blinding flashes of light are exactly the perfect mix of danger and wonder. But we also know that awe can be found in quieter moments. A spider web glistening with dew in the early morning sunlight can cause us to feel awe at its intricacy and beauty. Watching the changing deep orange to pink and then purple sky that mesmerizes us at a sunset. The smile and sweet scent of a baby in our arms. Those smaller, more daily moments can take our breath away as well. For some reason, we don't seem to seek them or register them as deeply in our minds. It's the larger events that we seem perhaps drawn to remember. On this Mother's Day, I would be remiss not to mention the awe of being able to create life. I suspect that any of you that have given birth or even witnessed a birth were in awe of this event. I could not believe that my body knew how to do things that it had never done before. Yet my chemical makeup, as hormones naturally surged through me during the birth of my children, caused my body to dilate and push and even breathe when my own brain didn't know what to do. How is that possible? That our body has this ability and knowledge to function on its own without guidance and leadership from our brain, causing us to even forget the difficulties of birthing as soon as that baby is laid upon our chest. It's a wonder to think of. A miracle, really. To all of you mothers who have lived this miracle, I wish you a happy Mother's Day. And to all of you who have lost a child or struggled with infertility, I hold you too in light and love as well. The desire, the want, the challenges, and awe of motherhood can be complicated and a heart-filled dance that can cause deep aches and unknown elation. Interesting enough, scientists are taking a deeper look at awe and its properties and how it can influence our lives. Doctors Dracker Keltner and Jonathan Haidt have created a lab at UC Berkeley to study this important but elusive feeling. Through their studies, they've recognized that feelings of awe actually bind us socially to other people. Their studies show that awe enables us to act in more collaborative ways that help to create stronger groups, and ultimately it improves our ability to even survive better. Let me share an interesting example. Keltner and Haidt staged a minor accident to see how people would respond. One was set up near the grounds of Berkeley's Museum of Paleontology, where a grove of exceptionally tall and beautiful eucalyptus trees stood, some of the very same trees that inspired Emerson and Muir. Here in this beautiful and majestic space, they had participants just hang out. After about 20 minutes, they had staged someone to fall and drop books and pens. The others around this person raced to help. In a survey following the events, participants reported that just by being in that space, surrounded by the majestic trees, they felt less entitled, less self-important. They felt more connected to the others who were in the same space. And when the person fell, they didn't hesitate to help. The same event was staged in the middle of a much less inspiring area of the campus with another group. In this setting, students did not report these same feelings of connection. None of them even tried to help. In fact, some didn't even notice the student who fell. Other studies they've done reveal that being in the presence of vast things calls forth a more modest, less narcissistic self, which in turn enables a greater sense of kindness towards others. Keltner and Haidt's studies have shown that moments of awe stimulate and increase wonder and curiosity. I know I find sitting on the shore of the ocean or one of the Great Lakes to calm me, but it also inspires me, as being in the presence of that great body of water feels so restorative. Their studies show that simply watching short videos like the ones you just saw with expansive images of the earth seem to encourage people to come up with more original ideas and more original approaches to problem solving. But guess what? Awe doesn't just stop at inspiring us. Studies also show that there's positive physical responses for the body when we experience awe. Keltner and Haidt's focus in the lab is on one of the branches of the immune system known as the cytokine system. Cytokines are chemical messengers that are produced by cells in damaged tissues. Many cytokines create an inflammatory response, which is important for killing germs and healing wounds. But unfortunately, when the body is in chronic stress, it can also create hyperactive cytokine responses. Hypercytokine production can create chronic illness and make one more vulnerable to disease. Keltner and Haight noticed that this hyperactive response was often found in those who experience extreme poverty and deprivation from awe. But guess what? They discovered that of all the emotions we have, only awe can reduce these hyper levels of cytokines. Experiencing awe can actually heal our bodies. How holy is that? Now, sadly, Dr. Keltner feels that our culture across the board is becoming more awe-deprived. He says it's not only folks who are experiencing poverty or chronic hardships, but that the majority of us are spending more time working and commuting and less time outdoors or engaging with other people. Now, of course, these studies were done outside of COVID times, but the facts still remain. Admit it. Our gaze is increasingly fixed on our screens these days, rather than noticing the wonders and beauties of the natural world or even physically engaging with others who are around us. I know I'm guilty of this myself. I hate that notice I get each week on my iPhone that reports my screen time. I try each week to reduce it, but then some weeks I don't do so well. COVID hasn't helped, and I guess I offer us all a little grace right now because of that. But I feel it. When I disengage and fall down that internet rabbit hole, I feel it in my bones. I bet you do too. I really need to read that ridiculous article about the Kardashians or watch another funny animal video. After lost hours of doing this, I actually find myself feeling more disconnected and restless. I spend a lot of time thinking about intention, especially now that I'm retired. How do I want to spend my time? COVID put a damper on many things, but even through all of that, nature was still there for me. Nature still carried on with its beautiful beginnings and endings of seasons, unchanged by the pandemic that roared through the world. With intention, I found solace in that. My husband and I explored more state parks than we ever knew existed. I found beauty in the slow decay carved in trees and fauna pressed hard by winter. I found hopefulness in the unfurling of ferns and leaves as spring warmed the air and invited its intoxicating and unstoppable resurrection. If spring could lift its head and begin again, so could I. So could we after this unbearable year. And here's the thing, that beauty, that awe, it's always there. That sky I saw in Norway, it's above me every single night. Last summer, I saw it again at Newport State Park, right up in Door County. Newport is a designated international dark sky park, one of only 48 in the entire world, and it's right here in Wisconsin. As I sat with my family last summer on that dark beach above our heads, shooting stars and satellites filled the sky. Mars was shining so bright it left a light trail on the lake. The awe of witnessing something bigger than ourselves was and is right outside our door. Kindness between neighbors and family happens every day. A neighbor plows your sidewalk unasked. A sister calls just because. Tulips and daffodils have pushed up their bright flowers from the darkness of the cold ground, and magnolia trees have burst with heady scent. They're there, showing off to us, even if we walk right past them unaware. I belong to a group of UU ministers on Facebook, and I posted that I was working on a sermon about awe, and I asked folks to share a time when they had experienced awe in their own lives. Their answers were beautiful, some expected, some unexpected, but all of them profound. Here are some things they shared, and maybe you have experienced some of them yourself. My first ever glimpse of the Grand Canyon, the birth of my babies, the first time I saw DNA under a microscope, watching a new full moon rise at the same time a family crisis unfolded, and it made me realize I was not alone. Sitting in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and marveling that man had created such beauty. The natural beauty of the glorious Rocky Mountains. Listening to a concert in the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Catching the sight of a double rainbow, so bright in color. Watching the sunrise between the rocks at Stonehenge. The everything bagel. One that deeply touched my heart was this: being present at the final breath of a 4-year-old who died from cancer. Walking down the aisle, knowing I was marrying my best friend. And lastly, my secret favorite, chocolate cake. I had a patient who lived to be 105. That alone is awe-inspiring, but he taught me something even more amazing. It started using the word privilege in a very different way. When I was visiting, he would say that he had the privilege to hear a beautiful concert the night before. He said he had the privilege to talk with his grandson every week, or the privilege to watch the sunset one evening. I asked him about the use of this word. It seemed unusual. What did it mean for him? He paused, and then he said he found such beauty and abundance in the world as he was coming into the last months of his life. He realized it was all such a gift, such a privilege to even participate, to even be alive. He felt so much appreciation for it. He vowed he would not take a single moment for granted in his final days. In his final days. I've always said that my patients were teaching me. He was telling me not to let this life and all of these gifts go unnoticed. I choose to turn away, to look at my phone. I choose to keep my head down as I walk past someone on the sidewalk. Instead of looking up to say hello and smile, I choose everything that I do that keeps me from seeing awe within my day. Knowing this, I can, you can, we can all choose awe. But let me pause and admit that I stand before you with another kind of privilege. I'm a well-educated, middle-class white woman who is now retired. I'm in a healthy relationship. My adult children are doing okay for themselves. I'm not facing illness, addictions, or pressing mental health issues or poverty. Those things are tough. Those things can get in the way when you're trying to look for awe. Please know that if you're struggling with any of those things, know that you are loved and cared for by this community, and that you are probably doing the best that you can right now. And to be honest, I find awe in that. There is tremendous awe in just doing the best that we can in times of struggle. When I look back at difficult times I've had in my own life, I'm amazed I made it through. Please, please don't beat yourself up if you're in that space right now. But if you can, I invite you, I encourage you to seek awe out in your daily life. Don't just look for it in those big moments, because studies show that when looking for awe, folks actually can experience it many times a week, often every day. According to Keltner, it's in the simple things that can bring it on. like noticing gold and red autumn leaves pirouetting to the ground, or being moved by someone who stands up to an injustice. I think of Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old girl who simply filmed and played silent witness for George Floyd. Maybe it's holding your loved one's hand as you walk together. Maybe it's hearing music being played on a street corner. All of these things can touch us in deep and powerful ways. But the trick is being present, really present. And that alone allows us to be open for more and more awe in our lives. In our reading earlier, I was amazed to read that the earth itself ever so slightly reached towards Newton's apple as it fell towards the earth. I found such holiness in that, such a connection between something vast like the earth wanting to pull towards that simple and singular apple. But is it true, I wondered? This phenomenon is actually Newton's third law that states that the force of the apple on the earth also caused the earth to accelerate ever so slightly towards the falling apple. The force of the earth on the apple is exactly equal and opposite to the force of the apple on the earth. They are in need of each other. I love when science can explain such a holy and beautiful phenomenon. It seems that we pull towards the earth just as it pulls towards us. The cliffs and the gulls and the ocean are pulling towards us just as we are pulled toward them. How awesome. You, Reverend Jessica Rodella, shared this when I asked ministers to share a moment of awe, and it touched a chord in me. It's from the book Return to the Springs by Jacob Trapp. When the first person stood, even as you and I have, over against a vast or mysterious otherness, whether in a grove of trees or in the mountains or under the stars, and we've experienced inexpressible awe and wonder, there, the first feelings of prayer were born on this planet. Whether before a volcano's immense fountain of fire amid blinding flashes of light under a desert sky, if that person stood, not trembling, merely in terror, but along with wonder and awe, before the mystery, the immensity, the power, and the glory of it all, that person's experience was essentially the same as that which Einstein called the very essence of true religiousness. Human beings are creatures who confront the universe. And although this makes us feel minute, it also magnifies and exalts our awareness. This invites an involuntary turning, a sense of awe and wonder before the sublime and the mysterious. They are both eons ago and still today. In these moments, we find a true theological experience, creating a natural and primary kind of prayer. And we've all felt that, haven't we? One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, identifies 3 types of prayer: help, thanks, and wow. When we step outside ourselves and fully see the beauty in a singular moment, such as the sticky kiss of a grandchild, the soft and mink-like fur of a new pussy willow, or the rhythmic trill of a bright red cardinal, it can take our breath away. And we feel that invisible tug between ourselves and everything. That feeling is definitely a wow. And we, science tells us, are better, both mentally and physically, for having witnessed these moments of awe. So go today and be present. May you seek the awe that awaits you. May it be so.